The door to the team facility slammed behind me, the echo swallowed by the roar of skates carving ice during morning practice. I was the new rookie, my gear still stiff and unfamiliar, and already I felt the weight of eyes. Hers most of all. Captain Elena, formidable in her pads, commanded the rink with an unreadable intensity that made my chest tighten. As the newest addition to this professional women's hockey team, I had to prove my worth amid the brutal dynamics. But something deeper stirred, an unspoken pull toward her that I couldn't name. Practice ended in exhaustion, bodies slick with sweat, and she called out the mandatory ice bath protocol, her voice cutting through the fatigue. The chill of the recovery room waited, sharpening every tension I tried to ignore. The locker room was a sterile cage, its white tiles reflecting the harsh fluorescent lights like a perpetual winter glare. Echoes of sticks clacking and voices barking orders lingered even after the ice cleared. But here, in this confined space, the air hung heavy with the scent of damp gear and faint chlorine from the recovery tubs. Our team, a tight-knit machine of ambition and grit, moved through the routine with mechanical precision. I, however, felt every step as a test. As the rookie, I was the outsider, my place precarious amid the veterans who had bled for every championship banner overhead. And then there was Elena, the captain, her presence as unyielding as the rink's frozen surface. She was everything I aspired to be, yet feared to approach. Tall, with a gaze that dissected plays and players alike, her dark hair pulled back severely, accentuating the sharp lines of her jaw. Her authority wasn't shouted, it simmered, a low command that bent the team to her will without question. I caught myself watching her during drills, the way her body moved with controlled power, each pivot a reminder of the power imbalance that defined us. She led us through suicides that left my lungs burning, her voice slicing the air. "Push harder, Rook! This league eats the weak." And with every barked order, an unfamiliar ache bloomed in my chest, admiration twisting into something more vulnerable, more forbidden. That first week blurred into a rhythm of grueling sessions, the ice a battlefield where I fought not just for skill, but for her fleeting approval. Mornings started with warm-ups, her eyes scanning formations, lingering sometimes on me just long enough to make my grip tighten on my stick. Afternoons brought video reviews in the dim strategy room, where she'd lean over the table, pointing out flaws in my positioning, her proximity a jolt I masked with nods. The team's camaraderie wrapped around me like armor, but it couldn't shield the internal storm her nearness provoked. I wrestled with it in stolen moments, toweling off after sprints, wondering why her commanding tone stirred a longing that had no place in this world of checks and goals. The inciting moment came after a particularly punishing scrimmage, the kind that left bruises blooming under pads and egos frayed. We'd pushed limits, Elena orchestrating the chaos with her usual composure, but I sensed a crack. Her glance my way during a botched play, not anger, but something assessing, almost expectant. As the team filed into the locker room, shedding gear in exhausted silence, she called my name. "Rookie, ice bath, now. Protocol for that ankle twinge you hid." Her voice was low, commanding, carrying an undercurrent that made my pulse stutter. The others murmured sympathies but dispersed, leaving us in the echoing space. The ritual was mandatory for recovery, but she enforced it personally, isolating me in its grip. Vulnerability hit like the first slap of cold water I anticipated. Stripping down to basics, hyper-aware of her composed movements nearby, towel slung over her shoulder, her form still radiating the heat of exertion, I felt exposed. Not just physically, but in the raw demands of the sport that mirrored my inner turmoil. The proximity amplified it. She was steps away, her intense gaze now on me, ensuring compliance. The ache deepened, a profound pull toward this unreadable figure who held my integration in her hands. As teammates' voices faded down the hall, the shared plunge loomed, the charged silence between us thickening like frost on glass. The recovery room door clicked shut behind the last straggler, sealing us in with the hum of the filtration system and the sharp tang of chilled water. Elena gestured to the tub, her expression inscrutable, but her eyes held mine a beat too long. "In," she said simply, and I obeyed, the cold shock waiting to mirror the emotional jolt building within. The space between us hummed, unspoken tensions sharpening as we prepared to immerse, the ritual pulling us closer than any drill ever had. The recovery room felt smaller than it should have, its white-tiled walls closing in like the confines of my own uncertainty. I stood there, heart thudding against my ribs, as the last echoes of the team's departure faded into the hum of the ventilation system. Elena moved with her usual deliberate grace, setting her towel on the bench and beginning to peel off the last layers of her undergear, her movements efficient, unhurried. I followed suit, fingers fumbling at the hem of my sports bra, the fabric clinging damply to my skin from the sweat of practice. The air was cool already, carrying that sharp, medicinal bite of chlorine from the tub, but it mingled with something warmer, subtler, her perfume, a faint trace of cedar and citrus that cut through the sterility like an unwelcome intimacy. I kept my eyes on the floor at first, tracing the grout lines between tiles as if they held some map to composure. Undressing in the locker room was routine, a shared vulnerability among teammates. But this was different. She was different. The team's rules loomed in my mind like invisible barriers, etched into every contract and huddle. Professionalism above all. No distractions from the game. As the rookie, I was already walking a tightrope, my spot earned through grit and guarded against any whisper of weakness. And yet, here I was, thoughts forbidden and insistent, circling the way her shoulders flexed under the fluorescent light, the faint scar on her collarbone from some old injury that spoke of battles I'd only heard in locker room lore. What was this pull, this ache that twisted admiration into longing? I wrestled it down, focusing on the chill seeping from the tub, but it resurfaced with every glance I stole, her form a silhouette of authority that both intimidated and drew me in. "You're hesitating," Elena said, her voice low and even, breaking the silence without startling it. She had finished changing into her swimsuit, a simple black one-piece that hugged her athletic build, and now she stood by the tub, testing the water with a toe. There was no accusation in her tone, just observation, but it carried that rare undercurrent of something softer, a glimpse beneath the captain's unyielding facade. "It's colder than it looks, but it'll ease the inflammation. Trust me, I've done 1,000 of these." Her words were encouragement, casual as coaching a drill, yet they revealed a flicker of vulnerability, the way her fingers tightened briefly on the tub's edge, as if the cold held memories for her, too. I nodded, forcing a smile that felt brittle, and slipped into my own suit, the fabric cool against my heated skin. Our eyes met then, lingering a fraction longer than protocol allowed. Hers dark and assessing, mine wide with the effort to mask the storm inside. The space between us hummed, charged with an electricity that had nothing to do with the room's static air, every inch amplifying the unspoken. I could feel it in the way the chlorine sharpened, mixing with her scent to heighten the intimacy of this isolated ritual. The world outside reduced to muffled, distant shouts from the hall. My hesitation deepened as I approached the tub, the water's surface deceptively still, ice chunks floating like threats. The vulnerability of it all, the near nakedness, the enforced closeness, clawed at me, stirring thoughts I had no right to entertain. What if she noticed? What if this pull betrayed me, shattering the fragile respect I'd clawed for? Elena's gaze sharpened, drawing her closer without a word. She stepped nearer, her presence forcing the proximity I'd both dreaded and craved. "Here," she murmured, her hand hovering near my elbow, not quite touching, but close enough that I felt the warmth radiating from her skin. Breathe through it. You're tougher than you think. The complication of her attention pinned me, the air thickening, her composure cracking just enough to mirror my own unraveling. We stood there, inches apart, the hum between us now a tangible thing, pulling us toward the inevitable. Then, with a shared nod, we moved as one, lowering into the tub together, the cold shock seizing us like a jolt, mirroring the emotional surge that neither could ignore any longer. The water hit like a betrayal, a brutal seize that stole my breath before I could brace for it. I lowered myself, inch by inch, the surface parting with a reluctant slosh, ice chunks scraping against my skin like tiny accusations. The cold burrowed deep, a vice clamping around my ribs, forcing my muscles to contract in sharp, involuntary spasms. Elena sank in beside me, her entry more controlled, but I saw the flicker in her jaw, the brief clench that betrayed even her composure. The tub was cramped, designed for efficiency rather than comfort, a shared space that left no room for distance. Our thighs brushing under the surface as we settled, the contact electric, despite the numbing chill. Shivers started immediately, rippling through me like aftershocks, my body fighting the invasion with every fiber. I hugged my arms to my chest, trying to contain the tremor, but it only amplified the awareness of her proximity. Her knee nudged mine as she adjusted, an accidental shift that ignited something fierce within, a storm of heat battling the frost. The air above the water hung thick, our breaths visible in shallow puffs, mingling in the confined space like secrets unwilling to dissipate. I focused on the cracking ice, the way it splintered softly against the tub's sides, louder than my pounding heart, which echoed in my ears with a rhythm that drowned out the hum of the room. This was supposed to be recovery, a ritual to mend the body's strains. But here, it stripped us bare, the professional boundaries blurring in the raw exposure of chilled skin and labored inhales. "Breathe steady," Elena instructed, her voice firm yet threaded with a gentleness that surprised me, cutting through the silence like a lifeline. She shifted closer, her hand hovering near my shoulder, not quite touching, but near enough that I felt the promise of warmth radiating from her palm, a counterpoint to the water's grip. In through the nose, out slow. Let it circulate. Don't fight it. Her words were coaching, the captain's duty, but they carried an undercurrent, her gaze locking on mine with an intensity that held more than protocol. I nodded, drawing air in ragged pulls, my chest rising and falling in sync with hers, the shared rhythm pulling us into an unspoken harmony. Her eyes, dark and unreadable as ever, betrayed a fleeting uncertainty now, a softening at the edges, as if the cold peeled back her layers too, exposing the woman beneath the authority. The power play hummed between us, subtle but insistent. She maintained control, her posture straight despite the shivers that ghosted over her arms, directing me with that low command that had always stirred me during drills. Yet in this vulnerability, the imbalance shifted, her nearness a reminder of the stakes. Not just my ankles' ache, but the deeper pull that threatened everything. Attraction warred with restraint, my mind mapping the curve of her shoulder inches away, the way droplets clung to her collarbone like forbidden invitations. The silence stretched heavy, weighted with what we didn't say, pretenses dissolving in the chill that equalized us, bodies reacting with primal honesty. Goosebumps rose not solely from the cold, but from the charge of her presence, the way her breath warmed the space between our faces. I glanced up, catching her watching me, and for a moment the world narrowed to that gaze. Assessing, yes, but laced with something raw, a mirror to my own turmoil. The ice shifted again, a subtle bump that pressed our arms together, skin to skin, the contact sending a jolt sharper than any check on the rink. She didn't pull away. Instead, her fingers flexed, as if anchoring us both. The emotional layering deepened, vulnerability wrapping around us like the water, stripping the captain's facade and my rookie's armor until only the ache remained, profound and undeniable. Then, haltingly, words broke the surface. "How's the ankle holding?" she asked, her voice softer now, cutting through the chill like a tentative warmth, inviting the conversation that would unravel us further. Her question hung in the frosted air, simple on the surface but laced with something more probing, as if testing the waters beyond the tub. I swallowed against the lump in my throat, the cold making every swallow deliberate, my voice emerging rougher than intended. "It's holding. The ache dulling already." A lie, partial at best. The ankle throbbed faintly, but the real pain twisted deeper, in the chest where her gaze pinned me. Elena nodded, her breath clouding between us, warm plumes that contrasted the water's unrelenting bite, drawing my eyes to the way her lips parted slightly with each exhale. The proximity amplified it all, our shoulders nearly touching, the subtle rise of her chest sinking with mine in the confined chill, turning the tub into a space where every sensation felt magnified, a tangible ache pressing against my ribs. She shifted then, the water sloshing softly, and leaned back against the tub's edge, her arms draped along the rim in a pose that belied the tension in her frame. "Good. You can't afford setbacks this early." Her tone was captainly but softer, the command edged with concern that humanized her, cracking the unreadable shell I'd always seen on the ice. For a moment, silence reclaimed us, broken only by the faint crackle of melting ice. But then she continued, her voice dropping to a murmur that seemed meant just for me. "I remember my rookie year. Pressures like that, every shift a proving ground, every glance from the vets a judgment. The weight of it isolates you, makes you question if you're cut out for this cage we call a team." The admission surprised me, fragments of her past spilling out like unintended confessions, revealing the woman who'd clawed her way to captaincy through injuries and doubts she'd never aired in huddles. Her eyes drifted to the water's surface, tracing a floating chunk, and I saw the vulnerability there, the formidable facade giving way to someone who'd borne the same storms I now navigated. I seized the opening, the cold loosening my own guards, words tumbling out before restraint could pull them back. It's like that for me, too. Coming in, I thought I'd prepared for the drills, the hits, but not this. The constant feeling of being watched, measured. Like one wrong move and I'm out. My voice wavered, the admission raw, drawing a parallel to her hidden struggles that bridged the gap between us. Her gaze returned to mine, sharper now, but not assessing. Understanding, perhaps, mirroring the insecurities she'd just unveiled. The warm puff of her breath ghosted my cheek again, closer in the cramped space, heightening the sensory pull. The chill numbing my limbs while her nearness ignited an inner heat, the contrast a profound ache that settled low in my belly. We were inches apart, the water a shared boundary that both separated and bound us, turning the recovery ritual into something perilously intimate. "Tell me," she said, her question veiled, subtext threading through like an undercurrent, queries about team loyalty masking deeper curiosities, probes into what bound me to this life, to her leadership. What keeps you pushing through it? The wins? The camaraderie? But her eyes said more, searching for the personal drives, the unspoken reasons I'd lingered on her during plays, the pull that mirrored whatever stirred in her now. I hesitated, heart hammering against the cold's vice, then answered honestly. The challenge, yeah, but also finding your place with people who see you, really see you, beyond the pads and the puck. The words hung, heavy with implication, our breaths mingling warmer, the proximity evolving into a cage that trapped not just our bodies, but the emerging truth between us. I sensed it then, the mutual pull, undeniable. A magnetism that made the bath both sanctuary and prison, where professional lines blurred into personal longing. A shiver racked me suddenly, deeper than the cold's grip, my body betraying the internal turmoil with a violent tremor that rippled the water. Elena's hand moved instinctively, closing the scant distance to steady my arm, her fingers warm against my chilled skin, the contact testing limits we'd both unspokenly upheld. It lingered there, not withdrawing, the touch shifting from coaching support to something intimate, electric, her thumb brushing a subtle circle that sent sparks through the numbness. The tension peaked in that hold, her eyes locking on mine with an intensity that unraveled further pretense, the chill forgotten amid the heat building within. Her fingers on my arm anchored me, the warmth seeping through the chill like a secret declaration, steadying not just my shiver but the tremor deep in my core. I froze under the contact, the jolt sharp and electric, racing up my limb to coil in my chest, where it warred with the water's unrelenting grip. Elena didn't release. Instead, her hold tightened fractionally, thumb tracing that subtle path along my skin. Deliberate now, testing the boundary we'd both skirted in glances and commands. The tub's confines forced us closer, our bodies leaning instinctively against the cold's assault, thighs pressing under the surface, the heat of her radiating through the thin barrier of water, defying the plunge that numbed everything else. I could feel the subtle shift of her muscles, the way she angled toward me, her shoulder brushing mine in the cramped space, turning recovery into something perilously alive. The power dynamic hummed between us, a tangible current that amplified every inch of proximity. She was the captain, the one who decided lineups and enforced discipline. Her authority, a cage I'd willingly entered as rookie, yet here it twisted into longing, fear of exposure clashing with the ache to close the gap entirely. What if this touch betrayed us both, shattering the team's fragile equilibrium? My hard-won spot unraveling under whispers of impropriety. I wrestled the turmoil silently, breath catching as her free hand gripped the tub's edge, knuckles whitening, her composure fraying at the seams. Goosebumps prickled my arms, rising not solely from the ice's bite, but from the charged contact, her skin against mine a spark in the frost, igniting sensations I'd suppressed during endless drills and huddles. The forbidden draw of her form, powerful and unyielding, now vulnerable in this shared immersion. Elena's voice softened then, emerging as a murmur that cut the weighted silence, her usual command laced with isolation's echo. It's lonely up here sometimes, you know. The weight of leading, always holding it together when everything screams to break. The admission slipped out, raw and unfiltered, her eyes dropping to the water before lifting to mine, vulnerability etching lines around them that the rink's glare never revealed. She leaned in closer, the movement inevitable in the tub's squeeze, our faces mere inches apart, breaths mingling in warm clouds that fogged the air between us. The heat of her skin defied the plunge, a counterforce pulling at me, her knee nudging mine again, deliberate this time, sending another electric pulse through the numbness. I mirrored her lean without thinking, drawn by the ache, the space charged with what words couldn't yet name. Her perfume, cedar and citrus, intensifying amid the chlorine, wrapping around us like an intimate veil. Our eyes locked, the intensity stripping away remnants of pretense, hers darkening with a mix of resolve and uncertainty that mirrored my own storm. Words faltered into that weighted silence, broken only by the soft slosh of water as we shifted, her hand sliding from my arm to my shoulder, fingers splaying warm and firm, grounding us both against the cold siege. The sensory immersion overwhelmed, the prickle of gooseflesh under her touch, the subtle tremor in her frame that betrayed the captain's isolation, the way her pulse thrummed faintly against my skin where our arms pressed. Emotional intimacy bloomed in the quiet, a profound connection forging amid the vulnerability, her gaze holding mine with a pull that silenced doubts, turning fear into something electric, alive. The power imbalance lingered, humming like the room's filtration, but it no longer repelled, it drew. Her vulnerability inviting mine, the heat rising within us both a defiance of the frost encasing our bodies. Revelation built in that hold, the cold water fading as distraction, unable to quench the inner warmth surging between us, pulling us toward truths neither could evade any longer. The hold on my shoulder lingered, her fingers warm against the chill, a bridge between the frost and the fire building inside me. Elena's eyes searched mine, the unreadable mask she'd worn on the ice fracturing under the weight of our shared vulnerability. This, whatever it is, she whispered, her voice barely rising above the water's soft lap. It's been there since your first shift. That strange magnetism, pulling despite everything. I thought I could command it away, like any play, but here, in this cold, my composure, it's slipping. The confession emerged haltingly, raw edges catching on the silence, her formidable presence yielding to the woman who'd isolated herself atop the team's hierarchy. She questioned it aloud, her free hand dipping into the water, tracing idle patterns on the surface as if mapping her own unraveling. The admission a crack in the armor that left her exposed, human, achingly real. My breath caught, the reciprocation surging up unbidden, words I'd buried under layers of rookie deference now spilling free. I've felt it too, Elena. From the moment you called my first drill, your gaze, that intensity, it's amplified everything. This ache in the rookie's role, admiring from afar, knowing I shouldn't want more. I admitted the long-standing attraction, voice trembling not from cold but from the truth's weight, the power she held over my career twisting the longing into something sharper, more desperate. Our eyes held, the mutual acknowledgement a spark igniting the charged space, her thumb now brushing my collarbone in a subtle arc, deliberate yet tentative, fingers trailing under the water's veil to graze my side, sending ripples of heat through the numbness. The touch was intimate, exploratory, her skin against mine a quiet rebellion against the tub's confines, each shift testing the forbidden desires we'd both denied. We delved into the power imbalance then, voices low and urgent, the discussion weaving through the risks like threads in a fraying net. The rules, they're ironclad, she murmured, her hand pausing on my waist, fingers splaying warm and possessive. Team protocols, careers on the line. One whisper of this, and it unravels us both. I'm the captain, supposed to set boundaries, not cross them. But you make me question it all. This forbidden pull that defies the cage we've built. I nodded, the words echoing my fears, the stakes heightening with every shared breath. Lost respect, sidelined plays, the league's scrutiny that could end my shot before it began. Yet the dangers only deepened the draw, her touch resuming its path, tentative circles under the surface that mapped the shift from authority to equality, vulnerability wrapping us in a profound peace amid the internal storm. I leaned into it, my hand covering hers, guiding the intimacy, the ache transforming into something shared, electric, a sanctuary carved from the peril. Internally, I processed the revelation, mine charting the emotional landscape we'd entered, her isolation mirroring my insecurities, the captain's burden lightening in this confession, my admiration blooming into connection. The water no longer bit as harshly, the cold a distant hum against the warmth of her proximity, fingers intertwining now beneath the waves, deliberate presses that spoke volumes unspoken. It was peace, undeniable, amid the turmoil, her gaze softening with a longing that matched mine. The power dynamic humming, but no longer a barrier, just a thread binding us closer. A distant clatter from the hall shattered the bubble, teammates' voices filtering through the door, laughter echoing like a warning. The complication jolted us, stakes sharpening. We were exposed, the world outside encroaching on this fragile truth. Elena's hand withdrew slightly, but her eyes promised more. The tension unresolved as the cold began to reclaim us. We emerged from the bath then, water sluicing off our skin in rivulets that couldn't wash away the lingering heat, towels waiting like reluctant witnesses. The unresolved pull followed us into the locker room, every step charged with the secrets we'd unveiled, the air between us thicker than before. We stepped out of the tub in tandem, water cascading from our skin in cold rivulets that traced paths down limbs still humming from the plunge. The air in the recovery room felt warmer by contrast, almost stifling, as if it sought to preserve the heat we'd kindled beneath the surface. Elena reached for a towel first, her movements deliberate, wrapping the thick fabric around her shoulders with a precision that belied the tremor I glimpsed in her hands. I followed, the terry cloth rough against my goose-fleshed arms, absorbing the chill but unable to erase the lingering warmth where her touch had branded me. Her fingers on my waist, the subtle press of her palm. Our bodies, still damp and exposed, carried the echo of that intimacy, towels cloaking us yet failing to dim the inner glow, a defiance of the frost we'd endured together. She turned to me then, eyes shadowed under the fluorescent hum, and without a word, gestured toward the adjoining locker area, her hand brushing my elbow in a fleeting anchor that sent fresh sparks through the numbness. The space opened slightly, benches lining the walls amid lockers that stood like silent sentinels. But it felt no less confined, the scent of chlorine clinging to us like a shared secret. Teammates' gear lay scattered in the distance, abandoned in haste. But we were alone here. The door's click earlier sealing this pocket of vulnerability. Elena leaned against a locker, towel slipping slightly to reveal the curve of her collarbone, damp hair framing her face in unruly strands that softened her sharp features. What just happened? She began, her voice laced with rumination, low and introspective, as if weighing the fragments of herself she'd revealed. It's not something I planned. The cold strips everything bare, doesn't it? Forces truths to the surface before you can bury them again. Her words hung, probing the aftermath, her gaze tracing my face with an intensity that unraveled me further, inviting my own dissection of the moment. I nodded, towel clutched tighter around my midriff, the fabric's weight a poor shield against the ache evolving within. No longer a solitary longing, but an undeniable connection. Threads weaving between us that pulled at the walls I'd so carefully constructed as rookie. Barriers of deference and restraint now crumbling under her candid gaze. The chill echoed on my skin, a persistent prickle mirroring the emotional uncertainty swirling in my chest. Was this a fleeting thaw? Or the start of something that could fracture the team's unyielding structure? It does, I murmured, stepping closer, the space between us charged once more, her cedar citrus scent cutting through the medicinal air. I didn't expect to feel seen like that. Not by you, not here. But now, it's like the ache has a shape, a direction. My reflection spilled out, raw and unfiltered, the vulnerability she'd coaxed in the tub persisting, her presence a catalyst that transformed isolation into intimacy. The captain's isolation echoing my own until they intertwined. Elena's expression shifted, a subtle softening at the edges, and she reached out, her hand covering mine on the towel's edge, fingers intertwining briefly, in a gesture that promised discretion amid the obligations we both bore. "We navigate this carefully," she said, voice firm yet threaded with resolve. eyes locking on mine with a weight that sealed the pact. The team comes first. Practices, games, the cage we thrive in. But this, us. We find ways. Stolen moments, glances that say what words can't. No risks that could cost us everything. The agreement settled like a subtle vow, her thumb stroking my knuckles in reassurance, the touch tentative but affirming, a bridge over the uncertainty that the lingering chill evoked on our skin, numb patches warming slowly, much like the bond deepening between us. Then, unexpectedly, a soft laugh escaped her, dry and self-deprecating, breaking the tension like sunlight piercing frost. You know, I once froze during my first captain's speech. Words stuck, just like in that tub. But you make the thaw feel possible. The revelation of her lighter side peeked through, humor deflecting the intensity, drawing a chuckle from me in response, the sound echoing off the lockers and easing the weight. Her smile, rare and genuine, revealed the woman beneath the authority, playful glints in her eyes that hinted at futures beyond the rink's demands. Our laughter a deepening bond that fortified the promise we'd made. Days passed after that, routine practices resuming their grind, but now every huddle carried secret glances, her coaching laced with subtext that only we deciphered, the air between us forever altered. Those days stretched into weeks, the team's rhythm pulling us back into its relentless grind, but nothing felt the same. Practices resumed their brutal cadence, skates slicing ice, pucks thudding against boards, the sharp crack of sticks colliding like punctuation to our unspoken pact. Yet now, every huddle carried a secret current. Elena's eyes would find mine across the circle, a fleeting lock that spoke volumes in the midst of barked strategies and sweat-slicked faces. Her coaching, once a distant command, laced itself with subtext only I could decipher. A pointed, "Watch your line, Rook," delivered with a subtle tilt of her head, her gaze lingering just enough to send warmth coiling through me, defying the rink's chill. Stolen moments wove through the drills, a brush of her glove against my arm during a face-off setup. Accidental on the surface, but electric beneath. Her touch a reminder of the bath's confessions, pulling me deeper into the ache that now defined us. Internally, the conflict raged, a constant tug between desire and the ironclad loyalty the team demanded. I grappled with it in quiet hours, lying awake in my bunk after lights out, the facility's hum mocking my turmoil. How could I crave her, crave the captain who embodied everything I fought for, without risking it all? The fear of discovery gnawed, visions of sidelined benches or league whispers fracturing the fragile world I'd clawed into. Team loyalty was our creed, etched in every pregame chant. One slip, one misinterpreted glance, and the cage we'd built could snap shut, isolating us both. Yet the pull persisted, her presence a magnet during line rushes, her voice cutting through fatigue with an undercurrent that made my pulse stutter, turning routine exertion into something perilously personal. Key interactions deepened the bond, echoing the bath's intimacy in unexpected ways. Late-night strategy sessions became our refuge, the dim video room a sanctuary after others had dispersed, screens flickering with replays of botched plays. We'd sit side by side at the console, shoulders nearly touching, her knee nudging mine under the table as she leaned in to pause a clip. "See here, your pivot's off, but it's instinct. Trust it," she'd murmur, her breath warm against my ear, the words laced with double meaning that made my skin prickle. Touches started accidental, a shared highlighter passing between fingers, lingering too long. Her hands steadying my wrist during a heated debate over formations, but they grew electric, deliberate in their subtlety. Her thumb grazing my pulse point once, sending jolts that echoed the tub's revelations. In those hours, the air thickened with cedar and citrus, mingling with the stale scent of the room. her proximity a slow burn that unraveled me thread by thread. Elena's growth unfolded gradually, her vulnerabilities surfacing like cracks in the ice, making the captain's role feel less like a solitary cage. During one session, as rain lashed the windows overlooking the rink, she confessed over cooling coffee, voice low and ruminative. Leading them, it's a weight that isolates. Always the one holding steady when storms hit. But with you, it lightens. Your questions make the burden shared, not suffocating. Her eyes softened, the unreadable facade yielding to glimpses of the woman who'd risen through doubts and defeats. Her hand covering mine briefly on the mouse, fingers intertwining in the dim light. A profound peace settling in the space between us, her isolation easing as ours intertwined. Escalating stakes forced careful navigation. Teammates began noticing shifts, the way my checks sharpened under her watch, or how our post-drill chats extended a beat too long. Whispers rippled in the locker room, a veteran shooting me a quizzical glance after Elena's praise lingered during cooldowns, her tone warmer than protocol allowed. We adapted, glances coded, touches veiled. But the pressure mounted, fear sharpening the thrill. Every interaction a tightrope over exposure. The emotional payoff crystallized one evening after a grueling skate as I toweled off alone, the attraction settling as indelible truth, not a fleeting spark, but a core ache woven into my being. Her presence now essential, transformative. The high-stakes game loomed on the horizon, playoffs breathing down our necks, pushing boundaries further as the rink's demands tested our fragile secret. The playoffs descended like a storm, the arena's roar a thunder that matched the chaos inside me. Game night arrived, the air electric with stakes that pressed on every player. But for me, it mirrored the internal turmoil I'd carried since the bath. Every shift on the ice, a battle not just against opponents, but against the secret pull toward Elena. She led from the blue line, her commands slicing through the din, voice steady as she orchestrated our defense, drawing me closer with each barked adjustment. Rook, cover that wing, trust your read. Her leadership was a beacon, her gaze finding mine mid-play, intense and unyielding, fueling my drives while igniting the ache. I pushed harder, checks landing fiercer under her watch. The rink a stage where our bond sharpened my edge, yet the fear of exposure loomed with every near miss. The crowd's frenzy, amplifying the risk of a stolen glance betraying us. We clawed through overtime, bodies slamming boards, breaths ragged in the thinning air. Elena's pivot saving a goal that would have ended us, her form a blur of power that pulled at me even as exhaustion clawed back. Victory sealed in a final buzzer beater. The bench erupted, but amid the hugs and cheers, her hand gripped my shoulder briefly, fingers squeezing with a promise that sent heat surging through the post-game chill. The high lingered as we filed off, adrenaline humming, but I knew what waited, the ritual we'd both anticipated, now a deliberate choice rather than protocol. In the locker room's haze of sweat and triumph, she caught my eye, nodding toward the recovery room with a subtlety that spoke volumes. Debrief, she murmured to the group, but her look to me said confrontation, private and inevitable. The door clicking shut behind us as teammates dispersed, sealing our sanctuary once more. The tub steamed faintly under the lights, ice freshly added. But this time, the plunge felt chosen. A confrontation we'd circled for weeks. We undressed in charged silence, suits slipping away to reveal skin marked by the game's bruises, her eyes tracing the fresh welt on my thigh with a concern that softened her edges. Lowering in together, the cold seized us anew, but it couldn't quench the warmth building. Our knees touched immediately, deliberate, her hand finding my arm under the surface as shivers synced our breaths. "I can't keep pretending," she confessed, voice raw over the water's lap, the full depth of her feelings spilling like the ice melting around us. "This isn't just magnetism, it's you, pulling at everything I've built. The captain's barriers, the isolation, they dissolve with you. I need this. Us. Beyond the lines we draw." Her words dissolved the professional walls, vulnerability flooding the space, her gaze locking mine with a certainty that mirrored the truth I'd harbored, the power imbalance fading into equality. Her hand sliding to intertwined fingers, warm and unyielding. The culmination charged the air, proximity turning intimate as we leaned in against the cold's protest, her free hand cupping my neck, thumb tracing my jaw in prolonged strokes that affirmed the longing we'd both chased. Bodies pressed closer in the tub's confines, thighs aligning, her breath ghosting my lips in warm contrast to the frost, touches lingering, fingers exploring collarbones, palms splaying across ribs, each contact a quiet affirmation, electric and tender, dissolving doubts in shared heat. The world narrowed to that hold, mutual desire humming like the filtration's drone, her lips brushing my temple in a near kiss that sealed the depth, pretenses fully shed. We agreed then, emerging to towels that couldn't hide the flush on our skin, her voice firm amid the vulnerability. Discreetly, always, the team first. But we pursue this slow burn, moments carved from the chaos. Embracing it, we dressed in hushed promises, her hand squeezing mine one last time before the door. Emotional closure washed over me, the sanctuary of our connection transforming the ache into peace, a profound steadiness amid the league storms, her presence now a home rather than a cage. This was the journey's true beginning, boundaries redrawn not as barriers, but as paths forward. A shared glance post-practice caught me across the rink, her eyes promising warmth that lingered like thaw after frost, the secret bond sealing our silent vow. If this slow burn stirred something in you, subscribe for more tales of forbidden connections that unravel the heart.